Moving on, though, to probably the game that got social media abuzz more than any of them, and that was the Chargers and the Jaguars. Jaguars overcome a 27-point deficit, which is the third biggest comeback in the history of the NFL playoffs. First place is I think it was a 32-point comeback by Frank Reich, who was the backup quarterback for the Bills against the Houston Oilers. Down 31, 32 points, something like that. Came back and won the game. The second biggest comeback happened about a decade ago. Andrew Luck and the Colts came back from 28 down against the Kansas City Chiefs, won that wild card game. And then Saturday night, Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, and the Jacksonville Jaguars came back from 27-0 down to beat the Los Angeles Chargers. I want to start with Jacksonville before I get to LA. For Jacksonville, it's kind of the same situation I talked about with the Giants, although certainly there's more, and rightfully so, more optimism around the Jaguars starting quarterback than there's the Giants. It's no shade towards Daniel Jones. I gave him his shine, but Trevor Lawrence is that dude. I'll tell you what, if you're a Jaguars fan, or if you're just a fan of Trevor Lawrence, what gives you a lot of hope for the future, what gives you even more confidence than you already have in Trevor Lawrence going forward with him as your franchise quarterback, is that he had literally the worst first half of any quarterback in the NFL this year. By far, 4 picks. Now, some of them weren't his fault. That second one he tried to throw to Zay Jones, there should have been a pass interference, but nonetheless, 4 interceptions is 4 interceptions. He had a tip ball in the first one. He telegraphed one of it. Was bad. To rebound from that, to keep your composure for the team, you heard all the Jaguars players after the game talking about we believed in Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence talking about we believed in the locker room. To still maintain that confidence and follow up 4 picks with 4 touchdowns, hats off to him. And something else. There was hirings last year I was wrong about. Nathaniel Hackett being chief among them. But the two, I liked the Dable hiring. I loved the Doug Peterson hiring up from the Jags a year ago. Because you talk about a guy who, as I've said over and over in the show, is almost a little bit of a quarterback whisperer. Carson Wentz had his best year with Doug Peterson. Nick Foles not only won the Super Bowl, outplayed Tom Brady in the Super Bowl in what might have been Brady's best Super Bowl. Nick Foles outplayed him and won the game. That's coaching. That's Doug Peterson. And when you look at some of the free agent pickups, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, taking, obviously got the pass rusher Josh Allen, not the quarterback Josh Allen, but the pass rusher Josh Allen out of Kentucky, taking Trayvon Walker, number 1 overall, out of Georgia, the impact he's making. That Jenkins kid they got in the secondary is a ball hawk. He is a playmaker, led the team in interceptions this year. The Jags, again, go back to coaching, they know what they are. And I said coming in this year, and maybe it wasn't that much of a stretch, but I said the Jaguars were a lock this year to double their wins. I said they'd win 6 games, and the majority of their 11 losses will be close. They'd be down to 1 score. But again, what separates teams and what shows you that the Jags are going places, they're probably not going to win the Super Bowl this year. I'd be quite shocked if they did. Frankly, they're probably not going to win at Arrowhead next weekend, although, hey, it is Trevor Lawrence. He's never lost on Saturday. In high school, college, or in the NFL, he's never lost on Saturday, so we'll see what happens in Kansas City. But in the here and now, what gives you the optimism moving forward for Jacksonville is that they were down 27-0, by the way, to a very talented football team in the Los Angeles Chargers. Did not lose belief, didn't hang their heads. 4 picks. How many quarterbacks in the NFL throw 4 picks and come back and rebound with 4 straight touchdown passes? That's incredible. Not to mention the game-winning drive ending in the walk-off field goal. So hats off to the Jaguars. They deserve all the credit in the world for the win. I'll about to get to the Chargers. But for Jacksonville, they are ahead of schedule. Again, coming into the 2022 season, the Jaguars had a record from 2020 and 2021 of 4-29. As you can imagine, worse than the NFL in that span. And for that, they got not 1, but 2 straight number 1 overall picks, in which they took, of course, Trevor Lawrence and Trayvon Walker. But it goes to show you when you got the coach and when you have a superstar quarterback, which I think it's fair to say at this point, when you look at how Trevor has played since week 9 to now, he is a superstar quarterback. He's unquestionably top 10, and he's pushing to be in the top 5. Listen, if we're having an honest discussion, are there 5 quarterbacks you can absolutely, don't even think twice, can say, yeah, they are absolutely better than Trevor Lawrence? I don't know. Obviously, he's one of the great quarterback talents we've ever seen coming out of Clemson. Probably the best quarterback prospect we've seen since Andrew Luck. And before that, Peyton Manning. And before that, John Elway. He's kind of in that top 4 upper echelon Mount Rushmore of all-time quarterback talents to come out of a single draft. But he's living up to that this year. When you get him the proper coaching, Doug Peterson, and he's surrounded with the talent they did during this past offseason, it's paid dividends. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are in the divisional round. They'll face the Kansas City Chiefs. They are big underdogs in that game, as you would imagine. They are 8.5-point dogs in Kansas City, which, isn't all that surprising. The Kansas City is the better team. But I think we could be in for an interesting matchup at Arrowhead Stadium. Now, as for the Los Angeles Chargers and as for Brandon Staley. So we come into this game Saturday night knowing Brandon Staley is on the hot seat. Not just for how last season ended, in that Vegas, LA, they're tied with under a minute to go in overtime. Had that game ended in a tie, and again, it was tied with less than a minute left, Raiders had the ball and were actively trying to run out the clock. Had the game ended in a tie, both teams would have made the playoffs. Both. But Brandon Staley said, no, we're going to play for the win, even though we don't have the football. And the Raiders like, okay, let's play for the win. Josh Jacobs, breaks off a big run, and Daniel Carlson hits the walk-off field goal to send the Raiders in the playoffs, which they would have been in anyway with a tie, and the Chargers home. So a coaching decision into the Chargers season a year ago. And then last week, despite doing most coaches in the NFL do these days, not playing any of your starters in meaningless preseason games. Okay? Preseason means absolutely nothing. Obviously, does not count towards your record. You don't play them in those meaningless games, but in Week 18, when obviously guys are beat up at this part of the year, in a game that will not dictate your playoff seeding, you're locked in as the 5 seed, you play your starters, and you lose Mike Williams, who even had the Chargers won this game, he probably wouldn't have been available unless the Chargers had made some kind of crazy run and got to the Super Bowl. So you lost Mike Williams for effectively the season. You played Trevor Lawrence, by the way, earlier this year when you played the Jaguars late in the fourth quarter, despite the fact that he had severely injured ribs. Played him late in the fourth quarter despite the fact that you were down 38-10 with like 5 minutes left. Game's over. And then yesterday. So you're up 27-0. You give up multiple consecutive scoring drives. But can I tell you what is most concerning of all if you are Brandon Staley? The Los Angeles Chargers had a 7-play drive, another 7-play drive, which ended in a field goal, in which, by the way, I'm a big Justin Herbert fan, but he missed Keenan Allen open in the end zone. That's on Herbert. But nevertheless, that drive ended in a field goal. Then they had a missed field goal on the drive after on a 14-play drive, and then they went 3-and-out on their last offensive possession of the game. Take a guess, ladies and gentlemen, as to how many times the Los Angeles Chargers ran the ball. Just take a guess. 8 times. Los Angeles Chargers ran the ball 8 times against the Jacksonville Jaguars, despite holding a 4-score lead. Despite having Austin Eckler, who leads the NFL in touchdowns over the last 2 years. He's more of like a Christian McCaffrey hybrid two-way back. 38 touchdowns over the last 2 years. You really don't give him the ball at all. At that point when you're up, because the Jaguars, by the way, scored before halftime to make it 27-7. But you're up 20. You got to be feeling really good about yourself going into the half. You've got 4 takeaways, by actually 5 takeaways if you count the muff punt. Your quarterback's playing well. Your offense is playing with confidence. You run the ball 8 times. At that point, you're playing the clock. You're not playing the Jaguars. You're not playing Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson and all those offensive playmakers. You are playing the clock. I'm not saying play too conservative because then, you get Trevor Lawrence out of a rhythm. but they became too Trevor Lawrence reliant despite the fact that they didn't have to. Here's something else. Again, we talk about coaching. What is in the game? Football game is 60 minutes. What is the thing that we always point to if we criticize coaches about what they do in the game, in the confines of a 60-minute contest? We think about clock management. We think about, going for it on fourth down or kicking field goals, all that. But to me, the most important thing by far that a coach does or does not do in a game, halftime adjustments. And no team, or few teams rather, certainly no good teams, which the Chargers obviously are. They have a tremendous talent at quarterback and a loaded roster, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, which Brandon Staley is a defensive coach. But there's no good team in the NFL that is worse at making halftime adjustments than the Los Angeles Chargers, led by Brandon Staley. This season, in the second half, they were bottom 10. Bottom 10 in points given up in the second half. I'm sorry, bottom 5 in points given up in the second half. Los Angeles Chargers were bottom 5 in points given up in the second half. They were bottom 10 in scoring in the second half. Okay, if you want the numbers on it, they scored 8 points a game. They averaged 8 points in the second half per game, and they averaged giving up 12 points a game in the second half. That's coaching. That's halftime adjustments. That's where the guys like Reed, Tomlin, yes, I'll say it, Belichick, that's where they separate from everybody else. McVay, Shanahan. That's where they're different from everybody else. Even if things are going well, you say, okay, they're going to make adjustments. They're going to see, well, we're doing well. How do we respond? How do we adjust to what they're doing? Chargers are the worst team in the NFL among good teams in that regard. That points to Brandon Staley. Not to mention, he seems to be a coach that's easily provoked by the media or convinced by the media that he's making the wrong decision. As a coach, you've got to stand firm into what you're doing. Yes, talk to assistants. Get counseling from other coaches around the NFL. Nothing wrong with that. But being essentially bullied by the media into changing the way you operate. I say that because last season, what do we know Brandon Staley as? The guy who always went for it on fourth down. Like, he coached the game as if you and I were just playing a game of Madden. He always, at his own 25-yard line, he'd go for it on 4th and 2. That was what he did. This year, he rarely went for it. Even in situations where, like, coach, this is a 4-down territories type of situation. So clearly, he's influenced by the media. He doesn't make halftime adjustments. As a defensive coach, his defense has collapsed in the second half. All the red flags are there. Not to mention, is it safe to say that Sean Payton wouldn't be pretty interested in that job? With Trevor Lawrence, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Derwin James, the depth that they've got. Not to mention, you've got their left tackle, Rashawn Slater, coming back next year from injury, who was outstanding last year in his rookie campaign. This is Sean Payton written all over it. And this game, and many games of the last 2 years for the LA Chargers, point back to Brandon Staley. Brian Dable, look what he got out of Daniel Jones. Again, not to hate on Daniel Jones. He is not Justin Herbert. Has Justin Herbert, for as much as I like him, I mean, look at all the records he's broken in the first 3 years in the league. Has Justin Herbert from year 1 to now taken that big jump that we expect quarterbacks to take? Not really. He's still great. He's still a top 10 quarterback in the world. But he hasn't taken that, oh my God, he's amazing jump. Again, coaching. I don't know how you can possibly not move on from Brandon Staley after that game. I can't. I can't. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.